On a quiet winter road near Lake Tahoe, a retired soldier wanted only one thing: to disappear into peace. Beside him sat Orson, his aging canine partner, still loyal, still watching the world for danger. Then a faint cry rose from a snowy ditch, where a tiny lost puppy was surrounded by hungry stray dogs. Warren could have kept driving, but some lives are placed in our path for a reason. That rescue led him to Vivian Whitcombe, a woman from a world of glass, wealth, and impossible expectations. Together, they would learn that home is not always where you belong by name, but where someone refuses to leave you in the cold. If this story touches your heart, tell us where you're watching from, and please like and subscribe to help us reach 5,000 subscribers so we can keep creating more meaningful stories. The snow over Lake Tahoe did not fall like a warning that afternoon. It came down softly, almost kindly, brightened by a pale winter sun that kept slipping in and out from behind the clouds. The whole mountainside seemed washed in silver. Pines stood deep and still beneath their white coats, and the road curved along the slope as if it had been laid there by someone who trusted men more than mountains. Warren Pike did not share that trust. He drove with both hands on the wheel of his old gray pickup, his shoulders filling the worn seat, his eyes moving without hurry from the road to the mirrors, from the tree line to the shoulder, then back again. At 57, he had the kind of face that made silence feel natural around him. Long, weathered, carved by years of sun, cold, and things he had never found a simple way to explain. His brown ash hair had gone silver at the temples. A short, graying beard framed his jaw, trimmed more out of habit than vanity. He wore an olive-drab combat shirt beneath a faded field jacket, the shirt snug through the chest, camouflage sleeves creased at the elbows, faint horizontal bands crossing the upper arms. It was old gear, not a costume. Warren wore it the way another man might wear a work shirt with paint stains or sawdust in the cuffs. Beside him sat Orson. The German shepherd occupied the passenger's seat with the dignity of a retired officer who had not been informed that retirement meant relaxing. His coat was black and deep honey gold, the saddle across his back dark and clean-edged, though the fur around his muzzle had begun to silver. One ear stood sharp. The other tipped slightly at the end from an old injury, giving him a look of permanent, thoughtful skepticism. Orson's left shoulder did not move as smoothly as it once had. Warren noticed it every time the dog shifted his weight, though he pretended not to. Orson noticed everything Warren pretended not to notice. The pickup heater rattled weakly. A paper cup of gas station coffee sat untouched in the holder. On the seat between Warren and Orson lay a folded lease agreement for a cabin outside Incline Village, a hardware store receipt, and a small brown paper bag containing screws, hinge oil, and a cheap tin of coffee that would probably taste like boiled dirt. It was enough. At least Warren had told himself it was enough. A cabin, a wood stove, some repair work if anyone needed it, snow shoveling in winter, maybe dock work when the lake thawed. No barracks, no briefings, no young men looking to him for answers, no radios cracking open at 3 in the morning with somebody else's disaster waiting on the other end. No more missions. The word should have comforted him. Instead, it sat somewhere behind his ribs like a door that had been closed too quietly. Orson lowered his nose toward the paper bag and huffed. "Don't judge the coffee before I suffer through it," Warren said. The dog did not look at him, which somehow made the judgment worse. Warren's mouth almost moved toward a smile. Almost. He had been doing that lately, arriving near ordinary human expressions, then turning back before anyone could accuse him of feeling them. The road narrowed ahead where the plows had pushed snow into uneven ridges along the shoulder. Beyond the guardrail, the land dropped sharply into a white ditch, thick with brush and young pine. Warren slowed out of old caution. His right knee, stiff from years of hard landings and colder mornings, gave a dull complaint when he eased off the gas. "Deep pain means keep moving," he muttered. Orson's ear twitched. Wasn't asking for medical advice. The dog turned his head then, not toward Warren, but toward the right side of the road. It was a small movement. To another man, it might have meant nothing. To Warren, it changed the air inside the truck. Orson's body tightened by degrees. Not alarm. Not yet. His head lifted, nostrils widening. The tipped ear angled forward as far as it could, while the good one sharpened toward the trees. Warren let the pickup roll another 20 yards. Then he heard it. A thin sound beneath the engine and the wind. Too high for a grown dog, too broken for a bird. It came once, stopped, then came again, weaker the second time, as if whatever made it had already decided no one was listening. Warren braked. The pickup stopped in the empty road, tires crunching into packed snow. For a few seconds, neither man nor dog moved. The old reflex came first. Assess the road, the slope, the blind curve behind him, the visibility, the distance to the nearest house, the ways a simple sound could become something more complicated. Warren hated that reflex and trusted it completely. Orson gave a low rumble in his chest. "I hear it," Warren said. He switched on the hazard lights. Amber flashes pulsed against the snowbanks. He reached behind the seat and pulled out a flashlight, a roadside emergency whistle, and the small folding knife with the walnut handle that lived in his jacket pocket. Then he paused and looked at Orson. "Stay until I say." Orson stared back. Warren sighed. That was an order, not a conversation. The dog remained still, but the muscles along his back said he had filed an objection. Warren stepped out. Cold air folded around him. It smelled of pine sap, exhaust, and snow so clean it almost hurt to breathe. The crying came again, from below the road now, down in the ditch beyond the ragged lip of plowed snow. Warren crossed to the shoulder carefully. His boots sank through crusted powder. He swept the flashlight beam down the slope. At first, he saw only brush and shadow. Then, something white moved. A puppy. It was small enough to fit inside a coat, its fur white cream and clumped with ice, its body pressed against a tangle of frozen weeds. One ear stood up. The other folded sideways under wet fur. Around its neck hung a torn, pale blue ribbon, and something silver that caught the light for half a second. The puppy tried to crawl backward and failed. Warren started down one step. Orson barked once from inside the truck, not loud, not frantic. A warning with a period at the end. Warren froze. The brush beyond the puppy shifted. One dog emerged first, ribs showing beneath a dirty brown coat, head low, yellow eyes fixed on the small white shape in the ditch. Then another appeared behind it, black with a scarred muzzle. A third moved between the trees. Then a fourth. Not wolves, not monsters. Dogs. Abandoned, hungry, winter-thinned dogs. That made it worse. Warren had seen enough danger to know cruelty was not required for harm. Hunger could do plenty by itself. The puppy made another sound, smaller now, and one of the strays stepped closer. "Easy," Warren said, though he did not know whether he meant the dogs, the puppy, Orson, or himself. The passenger door creaked behind him. Warren did not turn. "Orson." The German shepherd landed in the snow with a heavy, controlled thump. His old shoulder dipped on impact, but he recovered without a sound and came to Warren's side. He did not charge. He did not bare his teeth wildly. He simply placed himself half a step ahead of Warren, body angled, head low, eyes on the pack. The brown dog stopped. A conversation passed between them in a language older than training. Warren kept his breathing slow. He had a bag of dry dog food in the truck bed, bought that morning because Orson refused the expensive senior blend and preferred the cheaper brand with absolute moral certainty. Warren backed up, never turning his shoulders fully from the ditch, and reached into the bed for the bag. The strays watched. Orson watched the strays. The puppy watched nothing. Its eyes were half closed now, its body shaking in short, uneven bursts. Warren tore the bag open and threw a hard scatter of kibble far to the left, toward a patch of open snow away from the puppy. The sound of food hitting crusted ice did what threats might not have done. 2 dogs lunged toward it. The black one hesitated. The brown leader stayed fixed on Orson. "Come on," Warren murmured. He blew the emergency whistle once. The sharp noise cut across the slope. The pack flinched. The brown dog stepped back. Orson gave one deep growl, not chasing, not challenging, only drawing a line in the snow and holding it. Warren moved. He slid down the ditch in a controlled half-crouch, one hand brushing the snowbank for balance. His knee protested. He ignored it. The puppy was closer than it had looked, and smaller than it should have been. Its fur had once been brushed and cared for. Someone had tied that ribbon. Someone had chosen that silver charm. Someone had lost it. Or left it. Warren did not like how quickly that second possibility arrived. The puppy tried to lift its head when his shadow fell over it. A tiny growl trembled out, more breath than sound. "Fair enough," Warren said softly. "I wouldn't trust me either." He pulled off one glove and offered the back of his hand, not reaching, not claiming. Snow settled on his sleeve, on the camouflage pattern faded from too many washes. The puppy sniffed once, then again, and shivered so hard its teeth clicked. Behind him, one of the strays snapped at another over the food. Orson's growl deepened. Warren saw the brown dog turn back toward the puppy. There was a moment then, small and sharp, when the old part of Warren wanted to solve the problem the fastest way. Advance, dominate, scatter the threat, make the world obey. But Orson did not move like that. The old shepherd held his ground with pain in one shoulder and snow gathering along his back, choosing restraint over force, because restraint was what the moment required. Warren swallowed. "All right," he whispered. "Your call." He slipped both hands under the puppy. It weighed almost nothing. That frightened him more than the pack. The little body was bones, wet fur, and a stubborn, fluttering heart. The silver charm swung against his wrist. A snowflake. Not cheap tin. Silver, engraved with careful lines, delicate enough to look foolish out here among ditch ice and hungry dogs. The torn ribbon was pale blue, fine fabric, the kind Warren would not have known how to buy without help. The puppy pressed its face into his palm. And Warren, who had carried wounded men, gear, timber, fuel cans, and once Orson himself after the dog's shoulder had been torn open, felt his throat tighten over the weight of one lost, half-frozen animal that did not belong to him. "Got you," he said. The brown dog took 2 steps toward them. Orson moved at last, not forward, sideways. He placed himself between Warren's path and the pack, broad chest low, black and gold body steady, his tipped ear flattened against the wind. He did not look young. He did not look invincible. He looked old, sore, and absolutely unwilling to move. The brown dog stopped again. Warren climbed back up the slope with the puppy inside his jacket. Snow slid under his boots. His knee burned. He used the pain as a marker and kept going. At the top, he opened the driver's side door and placed the puppy inside on the bench seat. It whimpered when he let go. "I'm not leaving," Warren said, surprised by how quickly the words came. He grabbed the old blanket from behind the seat, the one Orson preferred during long drives, and wrapped it around the puppy. Orson jumped in after him with more effort than he would have tolerated Warren noticing. The dog stood over the bundle, sniffed it once, then gave Warren a look. "I know," Warren said. "You warned me." Orson lowered his muzzle. For a breath, Warren thought the shepherd might reject the little intruder. Orson had never been fond of unnecessary chaos, and a half-frozen puppy certainly qualified. Instead, Orson touched his nose gently to the puppy's head. The small dog trembled, then shifted toward the warmth as if some ancient instruction had been given. Orson did not lick it. He did not fuss. He simply remained there, still and solid, allowing the puppy to believe, for the moment, that the world had walls. Warren shut the door against the cold. Outside, the pack had retreated toward the trees, drawn by the scattered food, swallowed gradually by the white and green of the slope. Warren watched them go with a heaviness he did not have a name for. He could not save every hungry thing in winter. That had been one of the harder lessons of his life, and he resented having to learn it again on a mountain road in retirement. He got back behind the wheel. The cab smelled of wet fur, old vinyl, coffee, and snow. The puppy's breathing came in small, uneven clicks from inside the blanket. Warren eased the truck forward. For several minutes, no one made a sound except the heater. The puppy eventually pushed its nose out of the blanket. Its eyes were dark, round, and too alert for something so tired. A little cream-colored spot marked the fur near its left ear, shaped almost like a drop of melted wax. The silver snowflake charm rested against Warren's old blanket like it had fallen from another life. "No tag," Warren said. "Of course not." Orson remained standing as long as he could, then settled carefully beside the puppy, leaving enough space not to crowd it, close enough to warm it. The puppy crawled into the curve of his body without asking permission. Warren glanced over. The sight did something quiet and inconvenient inside him. He had chosen a cabin because cabins did not ask questions. Wood could be sanded, hinges could be oiled, snow could be shoveled. A man could make a list and complete it and go to sleep having fixed something that stayed fixed until morning. Living creatures were different. They brought needs with no respect for plans. They entered through ditches and storms. They looked at you as if being found meant you had agreed to be responsible. The puppy sneezed. Orson blinked slowly, offended by the lack of discipline. Warren gave the smallest breath of a laugh. "All right," he said, turning toward the road that led back to Incline Village. "We can't keep calling you puppy." The little dog nosed deeper into the blanket. Warren thought about names he had known, names of men, names of bases, names carved into plaques, printed on forms, spoken over radios, swallowed by static. None of those belonged here. The puppy made a small grumbling sound against Orson's side. "Milo," Warren said after a moment. "Just until we find where you belong." Orson's eyes shifted toward him. "What?" The shepherd kept looking. "It's temporary." Orson lowered his head beside Milo with the air of a creature who had heard men lie before and expected no better of them now. Warren drove on through the bright falling snow, the silver charm flashing faintly each time the truck passed between the pines. He had come to Lake Tahoe to make his life smaller, quiet enough to survive. But in the passenger seat, an old dog guarded a stolen warmth, and a lost puppy breathed against a blanket that had not been meant for him. Warren kept both hands on the wheel. He did not say it aloud, because saying things aloud made them more dangerous. But he knew. The road to his cabin no longer led only home. By the time Warren reached the cabin, the snow had turned quieter. It no longer came at the windshield in bright strokes. It drifted down in loose, tired flakes, settling over the narrow road, the pine branches, and the sagging split-rail fence that marked the edge of the property he had rented, sight unseen. The cabin stood a little above the lake road, tucked between dark trees, its roof bowed under old snow and its porch facing a slice of Lake Tahoe visible through the trunks. It looked smaller than the photographs. Warren liked it better for that. Big houses expected things from a man. They asked to be filled with voices, furniture, arguments, visitors, birthdays, apologies. This cabin asked only to be kept warm and not allowed to collapse before spring. He parked beside a woodpile half buried under a tarp and shut off the engine. For a moment, he did not get out. Orson lay on the passenger seat with the puppy tucked against the curve of his body. The old German shepherd had given up pretending he was not interested. His head rested near the bundle of blanket, one amber eye open, watching the small white shape breathe. The puppy, Milo for now, had stopped shivering so violently, but his breaths still came too fast. Every few seconds his paws twitched as if he were running somewhere in a dream he had not survived yet. Warren looked at the cabin, then at the puppy, then at the grocery bag of screws and hinge oil on the floor. "Well," he said, "this is already more company than I planned for." Orson did not move. That wasn't an invitation to look smug. The cabin smelled of cold wood, dust, and the faint iron scent of an old stove that had not been lit in weeks. Warren carried Milo inside first, wrapped in the blanket, then came back for Orson's bed, the paper bag, and a cardboard box he found folded behind the truck seat. He moved with the careful efficiency of a man arranging a field station, though the emergency here had 4 paws and a silver charm around its neck. The main room held a scarred table, 2 mismatched chairs, a narrow couch, and a black wood stove with a pipe that disappeared into the ceiling. There was a small kitchen along one wall, a bedroom through a half-open door, and a window facing west where the lake sat blue and cold between the pines. Warren set Milo in the cardboard box near the stove, but not too near it. He had learned long ago that heat, like kindness, could forced too quickly on something half-frozen. The puppy stirred and made a thin, complaining sound. "I know," Warren said. "The accommodations are not up to your usual standards." He did not know why he said that. Maybe because of the ribbon. Maybe because of the silver snowflake charm now resting against Milo's wet chest like a tiny piece of another life. Warren had seen enough expensive things to recognize when something had been chosen carefully. It was not gaudy, not meant to show off. It looked personal. That bothered him more. He got the stove going after 2 failed attempts and 1 muttered insult directed at the damp kindling. When the first steady flames caught, light crawled across the room and softened the hard lines of the furniture. Orson lowered himself beside the box with a slow, guarded movement. His left shoulder gave a small hitch. Warren saw it. Orson saw him see it. "All right," Warren said. "I won't make a speech." The dog gave a weary breath through his nose. Warren filled a bowl with water and placed it near Milo. The puppy sniffed, but did not drink. He was too young, too cold, or too frightened to understand what was being offered. Warren stood there, broad-shouldered and useless. He could repair a broken hinge. He could splint a leg in the dark. He could read terrain, ration supplies, move men through bad weather, and hear a lie in a radio voice after 3 words. But a trembling puppy in a cardboard box made him feel like a man handed a violin and told to perform surgery with it. He took out his phone and stared at the weak signal. After a moment, he searched for the nearest veterinary clinic. The first call went to voicemail. The second rang 6 times before a young woman answered with the exhausted brightness of someone who had already dealt with 3 emergencies before dinner. "Small animal clinic," she said. "If this is about porcupine quills, we are booked until morning unless the animal is having trouble breathing." "It's not quills," Warren said. There was a pause. "That is already better than my last call." He explained only what he needed to. Found puppy, cold exposure, no visible bleeding, weak but responsive. The woman's tone changed from routine to focused. She told him what to do. Warm gradually, offer small amounts of water, no cow's milk, check gums, keep the puppy quiet, bring him in if breathing worsened. She recommended a powdered puppy milk replacer sold at Holloway's Market if he could get there before closing. Warren thanked her. Before hanging up, she added, "And if he has a collar or charm, someone may be looking for him. Storm's got everyone sideways today." Warren looked at the silver snowflake. "Noted," he said. He ended the call and stood in the soft stove light, phone still in hand. Someone may be looking for him. The sentence should have made things simpler. Instead, it placed a shape in the room that had not been there before. Another person's fear. Milo woke enough to lift his head. The puppy blinked at Warren, then dragged himself with great effort toward the edge of the box. Orson shifted immediately, blocking him with one large paw. Milo opened his mouth and bit Orson's toe. Not hard. He probably had no strength for hard. Orson looked at Warren with deep personal disappointment. Warren felt the laugh before he could stop it. It came out rough and brief, unused to the room. "That one's on you," he said. "You put the paw there." Milo sneezed, then retreated into the blanket as if he had made his point. For the first time since arriving, the cabin did not feel empty. That was not entirely comfortable. Warren found an old towel in the bathroom, warmed it near the stove, and used it to dry the worst of the ice from Milo's fur. The puppy endured this with tragic dignity for almost 20 seconds before trying to chew the towel. His tiny teeth caught a loose thread and held on with the desperate seriousness of a creature prepared to fight household linens until the end. Orson watched without helping. "You're enjoying this," Warren said. The dog blinked once. The daylight thinned. Warren checked the road through the window, judged the weather, and decided he could make it to Holloway's and back before dark if he left immediately. He did not want to leave Milo. He also did not want to feed him the wrong thing because pride had convinced him he could solve every problem with warm water and stubbornness. He looked at Orson. "Guard." The old shepherd's ears rose. Milo gave a small squeak from inside the box. Warren hesitated at the door longer than he liked. Orson lowered his head until his muzzle rested beside the puppy, not touching, close enough that Milo's breath ruffled the fur under his chin. It was not affection, exactly. Orson was not a sentimental dog. It was a decision. Warren zipped his jacket. "I'll be quick." Holloway's Market sat near the edge of Incline Village, wedged between a closed ski rental shop and a post office with a snowman leaning drunkenly beside the steps. Warm yellow light spilled from its windows onto the blue evening snow. A bell above the door jingled when Warren entered, and the smell of coffee, oranges, floor wax, and old wood wrapped around him at once. Behind the counter stood May Holloway. She was somewhere in her late 60s, though she carried herself with the compact energy of a person who had never once admitted that age was entitled to an opinion. Her gray hair was twisted into a knot and held with a pencil. She wore a red flannel shirt under a quilted vest, and her eyes moved over Warren with sharp, cheerful suspicion. "You're the new cabin man," she said. Warren stopped halfway to the pet aisle. "That a legal title?" "A temporary one. We upgrade people once they prove they can survive their first power outage." He considered that, then gave a small nod. "Fair?" May leaned one elbow on the counter. "You need something besides looking like you're about to argue with canned soup. Puppy milk replacer, antiseptic, small collar if you have one, soft food." Her expression changed just slightly. "Yours?" "Found." "Where?" "Road above the lake, ditch near the north bend." May came around the counter faster than he expected. "White puppy?" Warren looked at her. May's face lost its humor, not entirely, but enough to show there was a person behind the shopkeeper. "Cream white? Little thing? Blue ribbon?" Warren reached into his pocket and pulled out the silver charm he had removed only long enough to dry the ribbon. He placed it in his palm. May did not touch it. She did not need to. "Well," she said quietly, "that is not just any lost dog." The store seemed to settle around them. A refrigerator hummed. Somewhere in the back, a pipe knocked. Warren felt a familiar caution rise in him, not fear, but the hardening that came whenever a simple problem began attracting names. May pointed toward a corkboard near the front window. It was crowded with ski lesson flyers, snowplow ads, church suppers, missing mittens, and one printed notice protected under clear tape. Warren walked over. The photograph showed the same puppy, cleaner, fluffier, wearing the pale blue ribbon whole and bright. He was sitting on a polished wooden floor beside a pair of women's boots dusted with snow. His ears were uneven, one up and one half folded, and a cream-colored spot marked the fur near his left ear. Missing. Bellamy. The name looked too formal for a creature currently biting towels in Warren's cabin. Under the printed phone number and reward information, someone had written a line by hand in dark blue ink. "He is afraid of loud noises. Please don't lock him alone." Warren read it twice. There were wounds that announced themselves with blood, limps, broken skin. Others stayed hidden until a door slammed or a pan dropped or a firework cracked open the night. He knew the second kind better than he wanted to. Orson knew them too. May stood beside him now, holding a small tin of puppy formula against her vest. "That belongs to Vivian Whitcombe," she said, "though she'd probably tell me a living creature doesn't belong to anyone, which is the sort of thing people say when they own lakefront property and still manage to mean it." Warren kept his eyes on the notice. "Whitcombe Lodge? That's the one." "I don't know it." "You will if you stay here long enough. Old money, older timber, best view on the lake if you can afford a room or know which service road to walk before sunrise." May studied his profile. "Vivian isn't like the rest of what people imagine when they hear that name." "They usually are," Warren said. "Like what?" "Complicated." May gave a dry little laugh. "That, yes. Cold, no. She helped pay for the winter animal shelter 2 years running and made us all pretend the donation came from a regional grant because she didn't want the lodge board turning kindness into advertising." That landed somewhere Warren did not expect. He looked again at the handwritten line. "Please don't lock him alone." "Storm accident?" he asked. May nodded. "Word is there was a slide scare and a multi-car mess-up on the pass. The Whitcombe driver got hurt, dog got loose, search got tangled when the weather turned. Nobody's saying much official yet. Around here, silence means either lawyers or worry." Warren's hand closed slowly around the charm. He had come into town for formula, not a story. Stories were dangerous because they invited judgment, and judgment invited involvement. May seemed to know this too, because she did not push. She simply loaded supplies into a paper bag: formula, puppy food, antiseptic wipes, a soft blue collar, a rubber chew shaped like a trout, and a small fleece blanket with tiny pine trees on it. "I don't need all that," Warren said. "The puppy does." He reached for his wallet. May rang up half the items and ignored the rest. When he noticed, she looked at him over the register. "You can argue," she said, "but I close in 9 minutes, and I'm better at it." Warren paid. At the door, May called after him, "Mr. Pike." He turned. She had the missing notice in her hand now, a copy torn from a pad behind the counter. "Vivian's been calling every place that might answer. If that pup is breathing because of you, she'll want to know before the night gets longer." Warren accepted the paper. The bell jingled when he stepped back outside. Snow had begun to glow under the street lamps. The village looked gentle from a distance. Warm windows, tire tracks, roofs tucked under white. But Warren knew gentleness could be a surface. Behind every lit window,
Somebody might be waiting for a phone to ring. He stood beside his truck and looked at the notice again. Bellamy, not Milo. The name changed nothing about the puppy's breathing, the cold road, or the way Orson had lowered his old body beside him.
But it changed the direction of responsibility. A found thing could be kept warm until morning. A loved thing had to be returned before someone else's fear froze into grief. Back at the cabin, Milo, Bellamy, had escaped the cardboard box and made it almost 4 feet across the floor before falling asleep on one of Warren's wool socks. Orson lay beside him, looking deeply offended by the breach in perimeter security. Warren stood in the doorway with the paper bag. "You had one job," he told Orson. The dog thumped his tail once without lifting his head. Bellamy woke when Warren knelt. The puppy's little nose twitched at the smell of formula. He tried to stand, slipped, then leaned against Warren's glove as if it had always been part of the furniture of his life. Warren mixed the formula clumsily, checked the temperature against his wrist the way the clinic assistant had instructed, and offered it in a shallow dish. Bellamy sniffed, sneezed into it, then began to lap with desperate, messy concentration. Orson watched. The old shepherd's eyes softened in a way Warren had not seen for a long time. When Bellamy finished, he waddled unsteadily toward the glove Warren had dropped near the stove, placed his chin on it, and sighed. A full, trusting, foolish little sigh. Warren sat back on his heels. The missing notice lay on the table behind him. The printed reward line faced up. So did the handwritten plea. He could call the number. He should call the number. Instead, for several minutes, he did nothing. Not because he meant to keep the puppy. He did not. He was not that kind of man. But calling meant voices, questions, gratitude, maybe suspicion. Maybe a lodge car up his road before midnight. Maybe a world with polished floors and family names reaching into his cabin before he had learned how to live in it himself. Bellamy shifted in his sleep, nose tucked against Warren's glove. Orson raised his head and looked at Warren. There was no command in the dog's eyes, no accusation either, only recognition. Warren exhaled slowly and picked up his phone. The signal flickered between 1 bar and none. He dialed the number on the notice before he could talk himself into waiting for morning. The call failed. He stared at the screen. A practical man would be relieved. Warren was practical enough to know he was not relieved at all. He tried again. This time the call rang once, broke into static, then died. Outside, wind moved softly around the cabin. Inside, the stove ticked as it heated the room, and Bellamy slept with his chin on Warren's old glove, while Orson guarded both of them as if the decision had already been made without human permission. Warren set the phone on the table beside the notice. "All right," he said quietly. "We try again at first light." Orson lowered his head. Warren looked around the cabin. The old stove, the bare table, the boxes still unpacked, the leash by the door, the puppy blanket with little pine trees that May had pretended not to give him. Only that morning, this place had been a shelter for 1 man and 1 dog. Now there was a name in the room that did not belong to either of them. Bellamy. Warren sat in the chair near the stove and listened to the puppy breathe. The cabin no longer felt empty. It no longer felt safe in the same way either. Morning did not arrive cleanly. It came in layers of gray over the pines, with low clouds dragging across the ridges and snow still clinging to the world as if the night had not finished speaking. The cabin windows had frosted at the edges. Inside, the stove had burned down to red coals, and Bellamy slept in the little fleece blanket May Holloway had pretended not to give away. Warren had not slept much. He had tried the number on the missing notice twice before dawn and once after. The first 2 calls failed. The third went through long enough for a woman's voice to break apart in static before the line died. He had heard only fragments. "Whitcombe. Where? Please." Then nothing. Warren stood at the table, phone in one hand, the missing notice in the other. Bellamy had woken just before sunrise and eaten with more enthusiasm than coordination. Formula had ended up on his muzzle, one paw, and the edge of Warren's sleeve. Now the puppy lay against Orson's side, full enough to trust sleep again. Orson watched Warren over Bellamy's small white body. "I'm doing it," Warren said. "Don't start." The German shepherd's expression did not change. Warren folded the missing notice carefully and put it in the chest pocket of his field jacket. The silver snowflake charm, now cleaned of road grime, caught the stove light where it rested against Bellamy's new, soft blue collar. Warren had tied the torn ribbon around the handle of his toolbox. He had not decided why. Maybe because throwing it away felt wrong. The phone buzzed once. A text appeared, delayed and broken but readable. "Old Ridge Fuel. Can reach. No lodge car. Please bring him if safe. VW." Warren stared at the initials. He had expected instructions, a driver, a staff member, a polished message written by someone whose job was to handle complications before they reached the family. Instead, he got a plea that sounded like it had been typed with cold fingers. He looked at Orson. "Old Ridge Fuel," he said. "Then we come back." The dog rose carefully, stretching around the soreness in his left shoulder. Warren noticed. Orson ignored him with professional skill. Old Ridge Fuel sat near a bend below the pass, a gas station from another era with 2 pumps, a rusted service bay, and a sign that had lost 3 bulbs in the word Ridge. It was closed for the season except for an emergency phone box and a soda machine that probably had not worked since the Clinton administration. Snow had drifted against the garage doors. Wind worried loose strips of plastic hanging from the awning. Warren Parks knew the pumps but did not shut off the engine. He did not like the place. Not because it looked dangerous. Dangerous places often announced themselves too loudly. This one looked forgotten, and forgotten places had their own risks. No traffic, weak signal. Too many ways for a simple handoff to become a misunderstanding. Bellamy stood on the bench seat with his front paws against the window, tail beating the blanket. Orson sat stiffly beside him, alert but quiet. "Easy," Warren said. Then the side door of the service bay opened. A woman stepped out into the snow. For a moment, Warren did not connect her with the name Whitcombe. She wore a long cream wool coat that had once been expensive and was now streaked with mud along one side. Her dark chestnut hair was tied back badly, with loose strands stuck to her cheek. A scarf had been wrapped around her left wrist, not decoratively, but as an improvised bandage. Her face was pale with cold and exhaustion. Yet there was nothing fragile in the way she moved toward the truck. She stopped 6 feet from the driver's side door, as if she understood that rushing a stranger in an empty gas station was a poor idea, no matter how desperate she felt. "Mr. Pike?" she asked. Her voice was hoarse. Warren got out slowly. "Warren? Vivian Whitcombe." He had known that. Still, the name landed differently when attached to a woman standing ankle-deep in snow with one glove missing. Bellamy barked. It was a small, cracked bark, but Vivian's entire face changed, not softened, broke open. Warren opened the passenger door before she could ask. Bellamy scrambled across the seat, slid on the blanket, and tumbled into her arms with the complete lack of dignity reserved for the deeply loved. Vivian dropped to her knees in the dirty snow and held him against her chest. She did not seem to care that her coat was getting wetter, that her hair had fallen loose, or that Warren stood there watching a kind of grief reverse itself. "Belle," she whispered. "Oh, Belle, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Bellamy pressed his face under her chin, whining in short, breathless bursts. His little paws kneaded her scarf. Vivian closed her eyes and bent over him, as if the wind might take him again if she left even an inch of space. Orson stepped down from the truck. Vivian opened her eyes immediately, not startled exactly, but aware. She did not reach for him. She did not make the mistake of treating him like part of the scenery. "Hello," she said quietly to the German Shepherd. "You must be Orson." Warren looked at her. Vivian glanced up. "May Holloway said you had a retired shepherd. She said if I saw him before I saw you, I should behave better than most people do around working dogs." Despite himself, Warren almost smiled. "May talks too much." "She was kind," Vivian said. "That too." Orson sniffed the air, took in Vivian, the puppy, the cold, the gas station, the nerves around everyone's feet. Then he sat beside Warren, not relaxed, but not warning either. Vivian noticed that as if it mattered. It did. She tried to stand while holding Bellamy. Her knees nearly failed her. Warren reached out on instinct, then stopped before touching her. She saw the movement and gave him a small nod that was both thanks and refusal. "I'm all right," she said. "You don't look it." "That's honest." "Not always polite." "I've had enough polite since yesterday." That answer made Warren reassess her. He had been ready for money, instructions, maybe tears shaped for an audience. Vivian Whitcombe gave him none of those. She stood in the snow with a frightened puppy under her chin and the tired steadiness of a person holding herself together by choice rather than habit. "You hurt?" Warren asked. "Wrist. Bruised ribs, I think. Nothing dramatic." "People say that before they faint." "I have no plans to faint in front of a man I just met." "Plans change." For the first time, a hint of humor crossed her face. It vanished quickly, but it had been there. Warren nodded toward the station. "Where's your car?" "Gone. Towed after the accident." "Driver?" Her grip tightened around Bellamy. "Nolan Briggs. He's driven for my family for 22 years. Shoulder injury. Patrol took him to urgent care in Truckee because he couldn't feel 2 fingers. He argued the whole way. Smart man." "He would disagree just to be difficult." She looked toward the pass, where the road disappeared into a wall of white trees and low cloud. "We were coming back from the vet," she said. Bellamy had stopped eating after the fireworks event at the lodge. I thought if Dr. Keller checked him, I could stop worrying. On the way back, a rental SUV spun across the lane. Nolan avoided the worst of it, but we clipped the snowbank hard. Bellamy's carrier broke loose. The door latch failed. She swallowed. "He ran." Bellamy licked the edge of her scarf as if trying to erase the memory. "I stayed with the search party," Vivian continued. Then the wind picked up. 2 other vehicles got stuck above us. Everyone began shouting into radios. One of the volunteers thought I had gone with Nolan. Another thought lodge security had me. My phone cracked when I fell near the drainage ditch. By the time I reached the road again, the main pass was closed. Warren listened without interrupting. The story had the uneven shape of truth, not clean enough to be invented well. Too many ordinary failures leaning on one another, a latch, a storm, a wrong assumption, a broken phone, people trying to help and making a mess of it. He could understand that better than conspiracy. "So why are you still here?" he asked. "Your family can send someone." Vivian laughed once, without humor. "They have been trying. Lodge vehicles can't get through the main road. The lower route is jammed from a tourist bus incident. Cell service is unreliable. And apparently, according to one message that did get through, my family believes I'm already on my way back with Julian's team." "Julian?" "Julian Voss, Lodge Operations Manager." Efficient, well-dressed, and occasionally so committed to procedure that human beings become weather conditions in his reports. Warren absorbed that. "Call sheriff's office." I did, or tried to. Deputy Mendez left a message through dispatch saying they're stretched thin, but monitoring the road closures. She told me to stay put if I found shelter. Good advice. Yes. You're not staying put. Vivian looked at him over Bellamy's head. There it was. Not helplessness. Decision. There's a family council meeting tomorrow morning, she said. 8 o'clock. If I'm not there, they'll vote to move forward with the Northwood conversion. Warren said nothing. Vivian seemed to hear all the things he did not say. Rich people, lodge business, not my problem, not worth a mountain road in winter. It's not just a resort expansion, she said. The land includes 3 old winter shelter points and a service route used by search teams, animal rescue volunteers, and locals when the main road closes. My mother funded them years ago, quietly, before everything had to be branded and photographed. Bellamy squirmed, and Vivian adjusted him with her good hand. The lodge is losing money, she went on. Lydia is right about that. My cousin handles the finances, and she isn't heartless. Payroll is real. Repairs are real. Empty rooms are real. But if they close that forest into a private luxury route, people will lose access to shelter in the worst months of the year. Animals, too. Warren looked toward the ridge. That a legal issue? Some of it. Some of it is moral. Those are harder to put in a binder. The wind moved under the gas station awning and rattled the loose plastic strips. Bellamy flinched violently at the sound, burying his head beneath Vivian's chin. Orson stood, not toward the noise, toward Bellamy. The German shepherd crossed the space between them slowly, his old shoulders stiff, and stopped just close enough for the puppy to smell him. Bellamy twisted in Vivian's arms, saw Orson, and reached toward him with both front paws. Vivian looked down, startled by the force of it. Warren felt something in him tighten. Bellamy had known Vivian all his life, however short that life was. But after one night, the puppy also recognized Orson as safety. Not replacement, not ownership. Safety. Orson lowered his head. Bellamy pressed his nose to the shepherd's cheek and went still. Vivian's eyes lifted to Warren. For the first time since she had stepped into the snow, she looked afraid in a way that had nothing to do with the cold. "He trusted you," she said. Warren did not like the way that sentence entered him. Orson did most of the work. "I don't think that's true." "You don't know me." "No," Vivian said. "I don't." That honesty did more than flattery could have. Warren turned away and walked a few steps toward the front of his truck. He needed space. The ridge road climbed behind the station, narrow and half-buried, leading into timber country. He knew the old Forest Service cut through from the map pinned above his cabin table. He had driven part of it once when he first came to look at the property. It passed near the abandoned ranger station, then curved toward the back service entrance of Whitcombe land. It was not a road for panic. It was not a road for a wounded woman, a shaken puppy, and an old dog with a bad shoulder. It was also not impossible. That was the problem. Vivian came no closer. She let him think without crowding him. Warren appreciated that and resented it. "I can take you to the sheriff's substation when the road clears," he said, "or back to my cabin until somebody official gets through." "If I miss the meeting, the vote passes." "Then contest it later." "With what?" Her voice did not rise, but something sharpened beneath it. "Minutes? Regret? A speech about what my mother would have wanted after the land is already committed?" "That's family business." "Yes," Vivian said. "And the shelters are community business." Warren looked back at her. Snow had collected on her shoulders. She was shivering now, though trying not to. Her expensive coat, ruined at the hem, made her look less like money and more like a woman who had walked too long through a storm that did not care what her last name was. "I'm not a chauffeur," Warren said. "I didn't ask for one." "You asked me to drive you over a closed mountain route." "I asked if you knew a way." "I do." The admission came out before he could stop it. Vivian heard it. So did Orson.
Warren exhaled through his nose. I know a Forest Service road. Maybe passable, maybe not. There's an old ranger station halfway. If the weather turns, we stop there. If I say we turn back, we turn back.
If Orson shows stress, we stop. If Bellamy worsens, we stop. If Deputy Mendez gets through and tells us no, we listen. Vivian held his gaze. Agreed. Don't agree fast. I mean it. I believe you. No. You want to believe me, because you need the road. She took that in without offense. You're right, she said. I do need the road. But I also believe you. Warren did not know what to do with that either. He opened the truck door and reached for the radio clipped beneath the dashboard. It was an older unit, one he had installed after discovering how unreliable mountain cell service could be. He tuned through static until a dispatch channel flickered alive, then died, then returned in pieces. Carla Mendez, Vivian said. Deputy, if anyone answers, it may be her. Warren glanced at her. You know her? Everyone who has ever made a bad decision in winter knows Deputy Mendez. That sounded like praise. He tried the channel again. Static. A burst of voices. Then a woman's voice came through, clipped and practical, as if she had no patience left for weather or fools. Unit traffic only, unless emergency. Warren keyed the mic. This is Warren Pike on Old Ridge Fuel Access, civilian. I have Vivian Whitcombe and recovered missing dog. Request road status for Forest Service cut-through toward Whitcombe back route. A pause followed. Then the voice returned, sharper. Say again, you have Vivian Whitcombe? Vivian stepped closer to the open door. Deputy Mendez, it's Vivian. I'm all right. Bellamy is with me. The radio crackled. Miss Whitcombe, half the mountain thinks you're in 3 different places. That sounds like our communications plan. The deputy made a sound that might have been a laugh if it had not been buried under static. Warren could picture her from the voice alone, someone with boots planted, jaw set, and a list of idiots she was too busy to complete. Main pass closed, Mendez said. Lower route blocked until plow clears the bus mess. Forest cut through not recommended. Impassable? Warren asked. Not what I said. Not recommended. North Talus section is unstable. Stay south of the old ranger station if you try it, and don't make me write your names in a report with the phrase, poor judgment. I hate paperwork, Warren said. Then make good choices. The radio hissed. Mendez continued. Check in when you reach the ranger station. If you lose contact, shelter there. Do not push past dark. Warren looked at the sky. Vivian looked at Warren. Orson looked at Bellamy. The decision settled among them, not dramatic, not clean, but real. Warren opened the rear door. Get in. Keep him wrapped. Vivian hesitated. Mr. Pike. Warren. Warren, she corrected, and the name sounded careful in her mouth. Thank you. He almost told her not to thank him yet. Instead, he said, Seat belt. She climbed into the back seat with Bellamy tucked against her. Orson remained outside for one more moment, nose lifted toward the ridge road. The wind moved through his black and gold fur. His tipped ear trembled slightly in the cold. Warren rested a hand briefly on the dog's neck. You sure? Orson looked toward Bellamy, then toward the road. That was answer enough. Warren helped him into the passenger seat, closed the door, and walked around to the driver's side. Old Ridge Fuel disappeared behind them as the truck pulled onto the narrow road leading into the pines. The gas station sign flickered once in the mirror, then vanished behind falling snow. Warren had left his cabin that morning to return a lost puppy. Now he was driving a wounded heiress, a frightened dog, and his oldest friend, toward a forest road no one had recommended. He kept both hands on the wheel. This was not a mission, he told himself. But beside him, Orson sat upright, and behind him, Vivian Whitcombe held Bellamy like a promise she was not willing to break. The Forest Service road did not look like a road at first. It looked like a suggestion the mountain had forgotten to erase. Warren turned the pickup off the cracked fuel station access and onto a narrow, white track between the pines. The tires sank at once into packed snow, then caught on gravel beneath. Branches leaned inward from both sides, heavy with winter, brushing the truck with soft, dragging sounds. Behind them, Old Ridge fuel disappeared as if it had never been there. Vivian sat in the back seat with Bellamy wrapped against her coat. The puppy had worn himself out with joy and fear, and now slept with one paw hooked in the fold of her scarf. Every so often he twitched at the creak of the truck or the knock of ice beneath the tires. Orson sat beside Warren in front, upright but not rigid. His nose pointed toward the windshield. His good ear moved with the road. His injured ear, the one tipped from an old tear, trembled whenever the truck hit a rut. Warren saw it. He did not comment. Commenting on Orson's weakness was one of the few ways to offend both of them at once. The radio hissed from beneath the dashboard. Warren adjusted the dial with 2 fingers, steering with the heel of his palm. Static rolled through the cab, then a voice broke into it. "Pike, this is Mendez. You still on the cut-through?" Warren picked up the mic. "Affirmative. Entered South Track 5 minutes ago. Visibility? Manageable. That is not a measurement. It's the one we have." There was a short pause. Then Deputy Carla Mendez said, "Stay off the North Talus section. I got a plow operator reporting minor slides above the bend. If you see exposed rock on your right, you have gone too far north." "Copy." Vivian leaned forward slightly. "Deputy, this is Vivian. Any update from the lodge?" Static chewed the first part of the answer. "Believes you are being escorted by operations staff. I corrected that. They did not enjoy being corrected." Vivian closed her eyes for half a second. Julian must be thrilled. He used the phrase communication inconsistency. Warren glanced in the mirror. "That bad?" Vivian's mouth tightened. "That means he is furious and writing a memo in his head." Mendez came back through. "Ranger Station is your first safe stop. Check in there. Weather band says another band of snow is moving in from the west. Don't outrun sense." "Wouldn't dream of it," Warren said. Vivian made a small sound. He looked at her in the mirror. "Something funny?" "No," she said. "I'm just trying to imagine Deputy Mendez believing you." Orson gave a low huff that sounded suspiciously like agreement. The road climbed. At first, the journey was nothing dramatic. That was what made it tiring. The truck moved slowly enough that every yard felt earned. Warren kept the speed low, letting the tires find their own purchase instead of forcing them. He watched the angle of snow against tree trunks, the shape of drifts, the small shadows where the road dipped under powder. Mountains rarely hid their intentions completely. Men simply moved too fast to read them. Vivian did not fill the silence. Warren had expected questions, maybe nervous talk, the kind people used when the quiet began showing them too much of themselves. Instead, she watched the road and held Bellamy with her good arm, her bandaged wrist tucked against her body. That restraint changed the truck. It made the silence shared instead of endured. After 20 minutes, they reached a low stretch where wind had pushed loose snow across the road in soft waves. Warren guided the truck through the first drift, then the second. At the third, the front tires dipped and spun. The sound was not loud, but Bellamy jerked awake. Vivian immediately lowered her head over him. "It's all right, just tires. Nothing is chasing you." Warren shifted into reverse, eased back, then stopped. "We dig," he said. Vivian unbuckled her seatbelt. "You stay," Warren said. She looked at him, not offended yet, but close. "I can hold a flashlight." "You have one good wrist." "And one good hand." "That math doesn't impress me." Then give me a job that does." There was no challenge in her voice, only refusal to be placed carefully on a shelf. Warren considered her for a moment, then reached behind the seat and handed her a compact flashlight. "Stand on the uphill side. Keep the beam on the front tires. If the snow under you breaks crust, step back. Don't be proud about it." I try to reserve pride for indoor settings. Good policy. Outside, the cold met them hard. The wind had sharpened between the trees, carrying loose crystals of snow that stung the face. Warren took a folding shovel from the truck bed and cleared packed snow from around the front tires. Vivian stood where he had told her to, boots planted awkwardly but firmly, flashlight steady despite her shivering. Bellamy remained inside, whining at the window. Orson stayed with him, though every line of the shepherd's body said he disliked being separated from Warren while the truck was stuck. Warren worked without hurry. Fast digging wasted strength and made mistakes. Vivian seemed to understand that after a minute. She stopped trying to anticipate him and simply held the light where he needed it. That, Warren thought, was rarer than people knew. When the tires were clear, he scattered sand from a small emergency bucket under the tread. Vivian crouched and pushed the bucket closer with her boot. "Where did you learn this?" she asked. "Bad roads." "Army roads?" "Some." "And the rest?" "Life keeps a shovel handy." She accepted the answer without prying. Another rare thing. The truck rocked free on the second try. Vivian climbed back in, cheeks red from wind, hair looser than before. She did not complain about her wrist, though Warren saw her press it briefly against her ribs. He reached into the console and passed back a pair of hand warmers. She looked at them, then at him. "Thank you. Don't make a ceremony out of it. I was planning a parade." He almost smiled. The road worsened after that. A fallen pine blocked the track half a mile ahead, not large enough to stop them completely, but too heavy to ignore. Warren cut away smaller branches with his walnut-handled knife and used a tow strap to drag the trunk aside enough for the pickup to squeeze past. Vivian held Bellamy outside at a safe distance, speaking to him softly whenever the wood cracked or metal clicked. Orson stood near Warren during the tow, not interfering, not resting either. His paws shifted once on the ice. Warren caught the slight tremor in the dog's shoulder and felt irritation rise in him, sharp and useless. Not at Orson. At time. At old injuries. At the fact that loyalty aged in bodies that had not been asked for permission. When they reached the small wooden bridge marked on the map, Warren stopped well before it. Vivian looked ahead. "That doesn't look promising." The bridge crossed a narrow ravine where a creek ran black beneath shelf ice. It was made of heavy planks silvered by years of weather, with snow packed between the rails and icicles hanging below like teeth. One tire track from an older vehicle had frozen at an angle across the entrance. Warren got out. This time Vivian did not ask. She waited until he pointed to the glove box. Road flares. Not lighting them. Just bring 2. Weight markers. She nodded and did as told. Warren walked the bridge one plank at a time. He listened with his boots as much as his ears. Wood spoke when it was close to failing. It had a language of groans, hollow knocks, and the silence of rot. He scraped snow away with his heel and found the support beams beneath still dark and solid. Vivian came to the edge and set the flares where he indicated. "You trust it?" she asked. "No." She absorbed that. "Do we cross it?" "Yes." "That distinction seems important." "It is." She looked down into the ravine. "I grew up near this lake and somehow never learned to read a bridge. Most people only learn what life keeps charging them for." Vivian's gaze moved from the bridge to him. "And what did life charge you for?" Warren looked at the planks under his boots. "Attention?" The answer hung between them, plain and heavy. Vivian did not answer quickly.
Snow settled in her hair, bright against the dark chestnut strands. "That must have been expensive," she said. Warren looked at her then, not because the words were profound, because they were not careless. He gave a small nod and walked back to the truck. They crossed slowly. Vivian did not breathe until all 4 tires reached the far side. Bellamy, sensing the tension too late to be useful, barked once at the bridge behind them. "Excellent timing," Vivian murmured.
Orson turned his head and looked at the puppy with severe disappointment. The old ranger station appeared near mid-afternoon. It sat in a clearing where the road widened under tall pines. The building was small, built of dark logs with a green metal roof and shutters hanging slightly crooked. Snow had piled against the steps. A faded sign near the door read, "Tahoe Winter Service Point, 3, though half the letters had been scratched by weather. Warren parked facing out, habit older than comfort. The radio gave only static. "We stop," he said. Vivian looked toward the sky. Snow had thickened again, soft but steady. "For how long?" "Long enough to check the weather, warm the dogs, and see if Mendez comes through." Inside, the station smelled of cold ash, dry dust, and old pine. There was a black iron stove, a stack of emergency blankets in a dented metal cabinet, 2 wooden benches, and faded maps pinned behind cloudy plastic. Someone had left a broom in the corner, and a chipped mug on the window ledge. Vivian stepped in behind Warren and went still. Not afraid. Struck. "What?" Warren asked. "I've been here." He waited. She moved toward the far wall, where a shelf held a thick notebook sealed in a cracked plastic sleeve. Her fingers hovered over it before she opened the cover. The pages were stiff, filled with names, dates, weather notes, supply lists, short messages from travelers who had sheltered there across many winters. Vivian turned a few pages carefully, then stopped. Warren saw her face change before he saw the writing. On the page, in blue ink faded almost gray, was a neat signature. Vivian Whitcombe. Below it, a sentence had been written in smaller script. No one should be left outside in the cold just because they do not have the right key. Vivian touched the edge of the page with the back of one finger. "My mother," she said. Her voice had changed. It was quieter, younger, but not weaker. Warren looked at the sentence. He did not want it to mean anything to him. It did, anyway. He had spent years able to enter military bases with identification cards, codes, ranks, orders. Then, one day, all of that had ended, and the world had become full of doors that did not know his name. Civilian life had keys, too. The right smile, the right family, the right ease in a room full of strangers. Warren had none of those. Orson stepped into the station, sniffed once, then guided Bellamy toward the stove as if he had taken command of the shelter. Bellamy followed, trusting the older dog more than the building. Warren gathered kindling from a box beside the stove and checked the flue. Vivian closed the notebook but kept her hand on it a moment longer. "She funded these stations after a skier got lost in a whiteout," Vivian said. "He survived because an old logging shed had been left unlocked. My mother couldn't stop thinking about that. She said luck was a poor emergency plan." "She was right." Vivian gave a faint smile. "She usually was. It made her difficult." Warren lit the stove. Flame took slowly, then brightened. The room changed around it. Cold corners remained cold, but the center began to gather warmth. Vivian sat on one of the benches with Bellamy in her lap. Orson lowered himself nearby, sighing through his nose when his shoulder touched the floor. Warren heard that sigh. This time he did speak. "You need rest," he said to the dog. Orson ignored him. Vivian watched them. "He was injured in service?" Warren kept his eyes on the stove. "Last operation before retirement. Building collapse after an earthquake.
Search team went in after 2 missing contractors. Secondary shift came down. Orson got me out. And hurt himself doing it. Warren did not answer immediately. He kept pulling after the beam hit him, he said. Wouldn't release the harness until we were clear. That's what the report says. And what do you say?
The question was soft enough to be refused. Warren fed another piece of wood into the stove. I say he earned a quiet life. Orson lifted his head at that, as if the phrase offended him. Bellamy wriggled out of Vivian's lap and toddled over to the shepherd, flopping down against his ribs with the complete confidence of the very young. Orson looked at the puppy, then at Warren, then lowered his head beside him. Vivian's expression softened. Maybe quiet isn't the same as finished, she said. Warren looked at Orson. The old dog's eyes had half closed. His body was tired. His shoulder ached. His muzzle had gone gray. And yet when Bellamy shifted in his sleep, Orson moved one paw around him, forming a barrier without waking fully. Not duty, not training. Choice. Warren sat on the opposite bench. For a while, none of them spoke. Outside, snow tapped against the shutters. Inside, the stove gave off its first real heat. Vivian removed her glove from her injured hand and flexed her fingers carefully. Warren noticed swelling around the wrist. There's a wrap in the first aid kit, he said. I can manage. I didn't say you couldn't. That made her look up. He found the kit in the cabinet, took out a compression wrap and handed it to her without moving closer. She accepted it. That seemed to matter to both of them. As Vivian wrapped her wrist, she spoke without looking at him. After my mother died, my father started locking things. Warren waited. Not literally at first. Schedules, budgets, guest lists, access roads, staff permissions. The lodge had always been formal, but after her funeral it became exact. Every risk had to be accounted for. Every kindness had to justify itself. Fear does that, Warren said. Vivian's fingers slowed. Yes, she said. It does. The radio crackled suddenly, startling Bellamy awake. The puppy scrambled behind Orson's foreleg. Mendez's voice came through broken, but clear enough. Pike, status. Warren crossed to the truck door, leaned in, and keyed the mic. At Ranger Station, all accounted for. Weather worsening. Holding position. Good. Stay south route when you move. Lodge road crews clearing from their side, but slow going. You may have a window near dusk, but don't force it. Copy. Vivian stepped into the doorway behind him. Deputy, any word from Nolan Briggs? Static. Then Mendez said, Urgent care confirmed shoulder dislocation. No surgery expected. He is apparently threatening to leave against medical advice. Vivian exhaled, a sound halfway between relief and frustration. That sounds like Nolan. Tell him that when you see him. Mendez out. The radio faded. Vivian leaned against the doorframe, looking out at the falling snow. Thank you for asking, she said. Warren shrugged. He matters to you? Yes. Then he matters to the situation. She studied him, as if placing another small fact into a larger picture. The light outside began to lower, turning the clearing blue. Warren knew they could not stay too long. The meeting waited. The road ahead waited. The lodge, with all its polished arguments and locked doors, waited too. But for a brief while, the old ranger station held them outside of all that. A retired soldier who wanted no mission. A woman trying to arrive before her family made a decision in her absence. An old German shepherd who still believed protection was worth the pain. A small white puppy asleep under that protection, wearing a silver snowflake charm from a world larger than the room. Vivian closed the notebook and placed it carefully back on the shelf. Warren saw her trace the cover once before letting go. When she turned, her face had changed. Not hardened, settled. We should go when you think it's safe, she said.
Warren nodded. He rose, then paused by the stove.
The sentence in Vivian Whitcombe's hand remained in his mind like a coal that would not cool. No one should be left outside in the cold just because they do not have the right key. For the first time since leaving the army, Warren wondered whether a man could spend years outside a door and still be asked in without having to pretend he belonged there already. He did not say that. He only checked Orson's shoulder, tightened the strap on Bellamy's blanket, and stepped back into the snow to clear the windshield. Behind him, Vivian carried the notebook's warmth in her eyes. Ahead, the road continued through the pines. Whitcombe Lodge appeared first as light. Not the raw white glare of headlights or the weak yellow of a gas station sign, but a deep, honeyed glow spread across the snow as if warmth itself had been given architecture. The building rose beyond a stand of black pines, broad and old, with steep roofs, high windows, and stone chimneys breathing smoke into the winter dark. For a moment, from the curve of the service road, it looked almost unreal. Warren slowed the truck. The tires crunched over packed snow that had been cleared more carefully here than anywhere else they had driven that day. Lanterns lined the approach. The trees near the lodge were wrapped in small, white lights. Beyond the glass, people moved in evening clothes through rooms full of polished wood, brass fixtures, and firelight. A piano played somewhere inside, soft enough to feel expensive. In the back seat, Vivian sat very still. Bellamy had woken when the road smoothed out. He stood on her lap with his paws on the window, tail twitching uncertainly, as if he recognized pieces of the place, but not the way it felt after being lost. Orson, beside Warren, watched the lodge with his head lifted and his body tired. The old shepherd had held himself together through the road, the bridge, and the ranger station. But now that the worst of the drive was behind them, fatigue had begun to show in the way he shifted his injured shoulder. Warren saw the line of sleek SUVs under the portico, black and silver, each one cleaner than his truck had been before winter began. He looked down at his hands on the wheel. His knuckles were scraped from clearing the fallen pine. Snowmelt had dried in pale salt marks along the cuffs of his field jacket. The olive combat shirt beneath it was streaked with soot from the ranger station stove and pine resin from the toe strap. His boots were caked with road slush. He had not cared how he looked all day. Now he noticed. That irritated him. Vivian leaned forward slightly. "You can pull up by the front." Warren kept his eyes on the road. "Service entrance is probably easier." "No." The answer came too quickly to be polite. He glanced at her in the mirror. Vivian's face was pale with exhaustion, but there was a steadiness in it that had not been there at Old Ridge Fuel. Something from the ranger station had come with her. Not comfort, resolve. "They lost track of me," she said. "They lost track of Bellamy. They misinformed half the mountain. I am not coming home through a side door as if the problem is how this looks." Warren said nothing. He drove to the front. A valet in a dark parka stepped out from beneath the portico, then hesitated when he saw the truck. Warren knew that hesitation. It was short, trained, almost invisible. A man measuring whether the vehicle belonged and trying not to be seen measuring. The front doors opened before Warren could put the truck in park. A man came down the steps with a radio in one hand and a phone in the other. He was tall and lean, perhaps late 30s, dressed in a tailored navy overcoat that looked warm without looking bulky. His dark hair was combed back despite the weather. Even in the snow, he seemed arranged. Julian Voss, Warren guessed before the man reached them. Julian's eyes took in everything at once. Vivian's ruined coat, Bellamy, Warren's truck, Orson, the mud on the running board, the fact that two guests near the lobby windows had turned to look. "Vivian," Julian said, and the relief in his voice sounded genuine, for exactly one breath before management closed over it. "Thank God. We've had everyone searching the wrong routes. Are you hurt? My wrist. Nothing serious. Come inside, quickly. We'll use the east corridor. Vivian did not move. Why? Julian lowered his voice. The council members are in the main lounge. There are guests in the lobby. You've had a traumatic day. Let's get you upstairs, have Dr. Keller come over, and then we can decide what needs to be communicated. What needs to be communicated? Vivian repeated. Julian's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. That you are safe. And that Bellamy is safe. Of course. And that Mr. Pike brought us back. Julian looked at Warren then. Not rudely, that might have been easier. His glance was polished, professional, and therefore worse. It moved over Warren's jacket, his old truck, the retired German shepherd sitting upright in the passenger seat, the road grime on the floor mat. It did not insult. It categorized. Mr. Pike, Julian said, we are grateful, truly. The lodge will compensate you appropriately. For now, the priority is getting Ms. Whitcombe inside without alarming guests. Warren felt something old and familiar settle into place behind his ribs. Not anger, a door closing. He had stood in enough rooms to know when a man had been assigned a function. Driver, security risk. Helpful, local. Problem to be thanked and removed. Julian had not meant cruelty. That was what made it more efficient. Vivian opened the rear door herself. Cold air rushed in. Bellamy squirmed in her arms, half excited, half anxious. The puppy saw Orson and twisted toward him instead of the lodge. Belle, Vivian murmured. I know. Warren stepped out and walked around to help Orson down. The shepherd landed carefully, hiding the weakness in his shoulder with the dignity of an old soldier pretending stairs were not an enemy. Bellamy whined and leaned toward him. Julian's eyes flicked to the dog. We should have staff take the animals around to the service mudroom. No, Vivian said. Vivian. No. This time the word did not come sharp. It came quiet, and that made it hold. She stood in the falling snow with Bellamy in her arms, hair loosened from its tie, coat stained, wrist wrapped in Warren's practical bandage. She looked nothing like the woman in the polished photographs that probably hung somewhere inside this lodge. Yet for the first time since Warren had met her, she looked completely at home in her own skin. We go through the front, she said. All of us. Julian took a breath. Warren could almost see the machinery behind his eyes. Guests, liability, council optics, wet dog on antique rugs, unknown man in military clothes, unpredictable narrative. Julian was not evil. He was a man trying to keep a house from catching fire by smothering every match, including the ones meant to light the stove. Very well, Julian said at last. The lobby doors opened into warmth so sudden it felt physical. Warren stepped onto polished stone and wished immediately that he had stayed outside. Whitcombe Lodge was beautiful in the old way, the way places became when money had been present long enough to stop shouting. Massive beams crossed the ceiling. A fire burned in a hearth wide enough to stand inside. Framed winter photographs lined the walls. Skiers from another decade, lake storms, lodge founders in wool coats. A young woman with Vivian's eyes standing beside a snow-covered trail sign. Marion, Warren thought. He did not know how he knew. Guests turned. Conversation thinned without stopping. A woman in pearls lifted her glass halfway and forgot to drink. Two men near the fireplace looked at Orson, then at Warren, then quickly elsewhere. A child might have stared honestly, but there were no children here. Adults had learned to disguise curiosity as concern. Warren felt every wet mark his boots left behind. Bellamy suddenly wriggled free. Vivian tried to hold him, but the puppy twisted with unexpected strength and tumbled onto the floor. He slid on the polished stone, caught himself, and ran directly to Orson, pressing beneath the shepherd's chest. A small murmur passed through the lobby. Orson did not move except to angle his body around Bellamy. That, more than any explanation, told the room something it had not been prepared to understand. Vivian saw it too. She lifted her chin. "This is Warren Pike," she said, not loudly, but the room was quiet enough now. "He found Bellamy alive above the North Bend yesterday. He cared for him overnight, contacted the clinic, and brought him to me this morning." Warren looked toward the doors. Vivian continued. "When the roads failed, when our communication failed, and when every official version of my whereabouts became wrong in a different way, Mr. Pike brought us through the South Forest route. He did not have to. His dog, Orson, protected Bellamy when Bellamy had no reason left to trust the world." Julian shifted beside her. "Vivian, perhaps this can wait until—" "No," she said. "It cannot." The word went into the room like a match touched to paper. Not explosive, but impossible to call unlit. An older man appeared at the edge of the lounge entrance. Arthur Whitcombe did not hurry. He did not need to. The room adjusted around him as if long practice had taught it where authority stood. He was tall, but not large, silver-haired, dressed in a dark wool suit with a pale shirt and a cashmere cardigan beneath the jacket. His face was narrow, composed, handsome in a severe way that time had sharpened instead of softened. His eyes went first to Vivian. Only after seeing that she stood upright did he look at the rest of the scene. "Vivian," he said. There was concern in his voice, but it had been folded carefully before being brought into public. "Father?" "You were supposed to be with Julian's team." "I was not." Arthur's eyes moved to Julian. Julian's expression stayed professional, though a faint color rose at his neck. "We had conflicting reports," Julian said. "The storm complicated field communications." "Clearly," Arthur replied. Then he looked at Warren. "Mr. Pike." Warren gave a short nod. Arthur came closer, stopping at a distance that was formal without being unfriendly. He had the old-world habit of making politeness feel like a polished railing, elegant, useful, and difficult to climb over. "My family owes you a great debt," Arthur said. "For my daughter, and for the dog." "Bellamy," Vivian said. Arthur paused. "For Bellamy." Warren's respect for Vivian rose a fraction. Arthur continued, "You must be exhausted. Julian will arrange payment, dry clothing if needed, and transportation wherever you wish to go once the road crews clear a safer route." There it was. Clean, generous, proper. A dismissal wrapped so well that objecting would make the objector look rude. Warren felt Vivian look at him. He did not return the glance. He knew this kind of room. Not the money, not the lodge, not the piano or the stone fireplace. He knew rooms where the rules had been written before he entered. Rooms where a man could be thanked for bleeding in the snow and still not be invited to sit near the fire. "It was a road," Warren said. "I knew part of it." Arthur's eyes narrowed slightly, not with suspicion exactly, but evaluation. "And you chose to drive it with my injured daughter." "I chose not to leave her at a closed gas station in a storm." A few people in the lobby became very interested in their drinks. Vivian stepped forward. "He contacted Deputy Mendez. He followed safety conditions. We stopped at Service Point 3. If Warren had refused, I would still have tried to find another way." Arthur turned to her. "That is not reassuring." "It was not meant to be." For the first time, emotion broke through Arthur's composure. A flicker only. Fear, old and sharp. "You could have died over a meeting." "No," Vivian said. "I could have been absent from a decision you were prepared to make without me." The room changed again. This time it was not curiosity, it was attention. A woman stepped from the lounge behind Arthur. She was about Vivian's age, perhaps a few years older, with a sharp bob of dark brown hair and a burgundy wool blazer that made her look less like a guest than a verdict. She carried a slim black tablet under one arm and wore no jewelry except a watch with a square face. "Vivian," she said, "if this is about tomorrow's vote, we are not discussing it in the lobby." "Then don't start in the lobby, Lydia." Lydia Whitcombe's gaze flicked briefly to Warren, but unlike Julian, she did not categorize him by clothes. She assessed him as she would a ledger entry she did not yet understand. Relevant, inconvenient, not to be dismissed without numbers. "I am glad you're alive," Lydia said. "I'm also glad Bellamy is back. Both facts can be true alongside the fact that payroll is due next Friday, and the East Wing roof needs $500,000 of work." Vivian's shoulders dropped a fraction, not in defeat, in recognition. Lydia was not the enemy, Warren realized. That made the room more complicated. Cleaner stories had villains. Real ones had expenses. Arthur rubbed 2 fingers against the chain of a silver pocket watch tucked into his vest. The gesture was small, private, and almost unconscious. "The discussion will wait until morning," he said. "It shouldn't," Vivian answered. "But it can wait until I change and see Dr. Keller." Julian looked relieved. Lydia did not. Arthur's gaze returned to Warren. "Mr. Pike, please allow us to make you comfortable while arrangements are made." Warren looked at the fire. It would have been easy to accept. Warm food, dry socks, perhaps a chair in some side room where staff knew how to be kind without asking questions. He was tired enough to want all of it. That was why he could not stay. If he remained, he would become part of the argument. The soldier who proved Vivian's point, the rough man from the mountain road held up against polished incompetence. A symbol. Warren had spent enough of his life as a function. He reached for Orson's lead. "No need," he said. "We'll get out of your way." Vivian turned. "Warren?" Bellamy barked, not loud, not frightened. A sharp, distressed sound aimed at Orson as the shepherd began to follow Warren toward the doors. The puppy lunged out from under Orson's chest and scrambled after him, claws slipping on the stone. Vivian caught the trailing edge of his blanket, but Bellamy twisted free again and reached Orson's front legs, pressing against them with all the stubborn weight of 5 months and 1 terrible night. The lobby went silent. Warren stopped. Orson stood between the firelit room and the snowy doors, Bellamy tucked against him, Vivian a few steps behind, Arthur near the lounge, Julian with his radio still in hand, Lydia watching with her unreadable eyes. No one knew what to do with the sight. That was the strange power of it. Bellamy had been returned to his house, his owner, his polished floors, his silver-charmed world. Yet his small body still chose the old dog who had guarded him in a cold cabin and a truck that smelled of wet blankets. Vivian's face tightened as if the sound had hurt her. Warren bent slowly and touched 2 fingers to Bellamy's head. "Not leaving you behind," he said quietly. The puppy did not understand the words, or maybe he understood only the part that mattered. His tail moved once. Warren straightened. Vivian met his eyes. There was gratitude there, but also something more difficult. Apology without the insult of pity. She had defended him in front of the room, and still the room had remained what it was. Neither of them could pretend otherwise. "I'll have someone bring Orson water," she said. "He's got water in the truck." "That wasn't what I meant." "I know." That made it harder. Arthur watched the exchange with a stillness Warren could not read. Julian stepped in carefully. "Perhaps Mr. Pike would prefer the mudroom entrance for—" "No," Vivian said again. This time she looked tired of saying it. Warren saved her from a 3rd time. "We're leaving.
he said. "The dog needs rest. So do you." Vivian's fingers tightened around Bellamy's blanket. "And tomorrow?" "That's your meeting. It concerns the service route you just drove. It concerns your family. And the people outside it." Warren did not answer. Because she was right. Because he was tired. Because he had spent all day moving toward this place, and now that they had arrived, all he could feel was the old instinct to step back before anyone decided where to place him. He gave a short nod to Arthur. "Sir?" Arthur returned it with equal formality. "Mr. Pike." Lydia watched him leave as if she intended to remember the exact shape of the problem. Julian opened the door before Warren reached it. Cold entered the lobby, sharp and clean. Orson followed Warren out into the snow.
For 3 steps, Bellamy tried to follow too. Vivian caught him gently this time, kneeling despite the eyes on her, holding him close as he whimpered toward the door. Warren did not look back until he reached the truck. When he did, he saw Vivian through the glass. She stood in the warm lobby with Bellamy in her arms, surrounded by her family's light, her family's history, her family's expectations. Snow melted from her coat onto the polished floor. Her hair had fallen loose around her face. She looked both exactly where she belonged and painfully alone. Bellamy's little white head turned toward the dark outside. Orson sat beside the passenger door, watching the puppy through the glass. Warren opened the truck door. "Come on," he said softly. Orson did not move for a moment. Then, slowly, the old shepherd climbed in. Warren got behind the wheel. He did not start the engine right away. Inside the lodge, Vivian lowered her forehead briefly to Bellamy's. Outside, the snow fell between the truck and the glowing windows, not thick enough to hide anything, just enough to remind Warren that some distances were not measured in miles. He had brought them home. But as he turned the key and the old engine caught, he understood that home had not closed around them the way he had imagined it would. For Bellamy, for Vivian, maybe not even for him. The meeting room at Whitcombe Lodge faced the lake. That had always been intentional. Arthur Whitcombe believed difficult decisions should be made with the property visible beyond the glass, as if the land itself might remind people what they were responsible for. Tonight, the lake was mostly darkness. Only a silver edge showed where moonlight touched the broken skin of ice near the shore. Vivian stood at the far end of the long walnut table, with Bellamy asleep in a blanket-lined basket near her feet. She had changed out of the ruined cream coat. Someone had brought her a soft gray dress, dry socks, and a cashmere wrap she did not remember asking for. Her wrist had been properly examined and bandaged. Her hair was brushed now, pinned low at the back of her neck, but there was still a wind-burned flush across her cheeks that no amount of lodge polish could erase. Across from her sat Arthur, one hand resting near his silver pocket watch. Lydia had taken the chair to his left, tablet open, financial projections already arranged in neat columns. Julian stood near the wall, with his radio clipped to his belt, trying not to look like a man waiting for several disasters to become his responsibility. No one spoke for the first few seconds. The room still held the echo of Vivian's return through the lobby, snow on stone, Bellamy crying for Orson, Warren Pike leaving before gratitude could become spectacle. Arthur broke the silence. "You should be resting." Vivian looked at him. "I will rest after this." "You were injured." "I was delayed." Lydia's eyes flicked up from her tablet. Not amused, exactly, but attentive. Arthur leaned back. "If this is about the vote, it can wait until morning." "No," Vivian said. "It can't. Morning is when people perform positions they spent the night hardening. I would rather speak while some part of us is still tired enough to be honest." Julian shifted. Arthur's mouth tightened, but he did not interrupt. Vivian placed a folder on the table. Her hand trembled slightly when she opened it, and she hated that. Not because trembling was shameful, but because this family had always mistaken visible strain for weak reasoning. So she began with numbers. "The east wing roof needs replacement," she said. "The south guest house has mold in 2 walls. Bookings are down 14% from last winter. Staffing costs are up. The Northwood conversion would bring immediate investor money and reduce maintenance costs on undeveloped land." Lydia's expression sharpened. "That is the first accurate summary I've heard from anyone opposing it." Vivian nodded once. "Because you're not wrong." That changed the room. Lydia sat back a fraction. Arthur watched his daughter as if she had approached from an unexpected direction. Vivian continued. "But the proposal treats the forest like unused space. It is not unused. It is an emergency route, a shelter corridor, and the last part of this lodge that still means something to people who will never book a suite here," Julian said carefully. "Public access creates liability." "So does pretending weather respects private property," Vivian replied. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Vivian touched the folder but did not look down. "Service Point 3 kept us alive today. Not dramatically, not in a way that would make a good brochure. It gave us a stove, shelter, old maps, and a place to stop before pride turned into stupidity. My mother understood that kind of usefulness. She built it into the mountain quietly." Arthur's fingers moved toward his watch chain. Vivian saw it. She softened her voice, but not her argument. "I'm not asking us to preserve every acre because I miss her. I do miss her. That is not a business plan. I am asking us to preserve the corridor because it gives Whitcombe Lodge something no luxury expansion can buy after the fact. Trust." Lydia tapped one nail lightly against the edge of her tablet. "Trust does not pay contractors." "No, but neither does another private winter enclave that looks exactly like 6 others around the lake." That landed. Vivian saw Lydia consider it despite herself. Arthur looked toward the glass. The lake gave nothing back but darkness. "What are you proposing?" he asked. Vivian let out a breath she had been holding since the ranger station. "A compromise. Renovate the east wing. Approve a smaller guest house expansion on land already serviced by utilities, but keep the Northwood corridor open under a managed winter access agreement. Restore the old shelter points. Partner with county rescue, animal welfare volunteers, and local businesses. Make the lodge part of the winter safety network instead of a wall built beside it." Julian frowned. "Operationally, that is complicated." "Then operate," Vivian said. The sentence was not cruel. It was simply tired of fear dressed as procedure. Julian looked down. Lydia turned the tablet toward herself and began making notes. "A program like that would need staffing, insurance, training, communications, maintenance, veterinary partners, equipment storage, liability waivers. Yes. It would cost money before it made any. Yes. And you believe it could eventually support brand value, community partnership, off-season relevance, and grant eligibility?" Vivian looked at her cousin. "Yes." Lydia was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "That is not impossible." Arthur turned to her. "Lydia." "I said not impossible. I did not say easy." Vivian almost smiled. From Lydia, that was close to applause. The phone on the table rang before Arthur could respond. Julian glanced at the screen. "Truckee Urgent Care, Nolan Briggs." Vivian's heart moved at the name. "Put him through." A moment later, Nolan's face appeared on the wall screen, the camera angled too low so that his chin looked larger than usual. He was in a hospital bed wearing a sling, his silver hair flattened on one side, his thin mustache bent by what looked like a failed attempt at drinking from a straw. "Miss Vivian," he said, "if anyone tells you I was difficult, they are exaggerating for legal reasons." Vivian's throat tightened with relief. "Are you all right?" I have had better evenings, also worse sandwiches. Arthur leaned forward. Nolan, you should be resting. So should you, sir. But here we are. Lydia made a small sound that might have been a cough. Nolan looked more serious then, his eyes, usually mild, fixed on Arthur through the screen. Mr. Whitcombe, I need to say this clear. Miss Vivian didn't wander off being foolish. She stayed because Bellamy bolted after the carrier latch failed. We had too many people assuming somebody else had her. Radios were jammed. Lodge Dispatch had 3 different locations for her in 20 minutes. Julian's face tightened. Nolan went on. That little dog survived because a man outside our system stopped on a road in weather most people hurry through. Miss Vivian got back because that same man knew when to move and when to stop. Begging your pardon, sir, but our system looked very fine from the lobby and very poor from the ditch. No one spoke. Nolan shifted, winced, and kept going anyway. I've driven for this family 22 years. Mrs. Marion used to say a lodge is not proved by how it treats guests who pay full rate. It's proved by whether a freezing person can find a light in the window when no one important is watching. Arthur looked down at his pocket watch. For the first time that night, Vivian saw not the owner, not the father, not the man protecting a ledger, but the widower. Nolan cleared his throat. Also, if anyone votes before Miss Vivian has coffee and pain medicine, I resign retroactively. The call ended with Julian promising to send soup to urgent care, and Nolan claiming soup was not a medical plan. Silence returned, but it was no longer empty. Arthur rose from his chair and walked to the window. He stood with his back to them, one hand in his pocket, the other resting against the glass. When your mother opened the first shelter, he said, I told her she was inviting lawsuits, vagrants, broken locks, and expense. Vivian waited. She told me I was making a list of inconveniences and calling it wisdom. Lydia looked down, hiding whatever crossed her face. Arthur turned. I will not approve sentiment disguised as strategy, he said. Vivian held his gaze. Then approve strategy that remembers why sentiment existed. The corner of Lydia's mouth moved. Julian looked as if he wished he were holding a thicker clipboard. Arthur sat again. We postpone the Northwood vote, he said. 48 hours. Lydia, examine the alternative financial model. Julian, list operational requirements. Vivian, if you intend to attach Mr. Pike's name to this program in any capacity, ask him before using him as evidence. Vivian took that. She deserved it. I will, she said. Arthur's gaze softened for a breath. And Vivian? Yes? Next time you are missing in a storm, prioritize being found before changing the future of the lodge. Her smile was tired, but real. I'll try to schedule crises more efficiently. Julian looked pained. Bellamy woke and yawned from the basket. The meeting ended not with victory, but with work. Across the mountain, Warren Pike returned to a cabin that felt too quiet after one night of not being quiet enough. He parked beside the woodpile and sat for a while after shutting off the engine. Orson remained in the passenger seat, staring through the windshield toward the black line of trees. The lodge lights were not visible from here, but the dog seemed to know the direction. Don't, Warren said. Orson did not look at him. Inside, the stove had gone cold. The cardboard box still sat near it, empty except for a corner of the pine-patterned fleece blanket Bellamy had chewed. Warren picked it up and folded it before he realized what he was doing. On the table lay the envelope Arthur's staff had pressed into his hand before he left. Warren had tried to refuse it. Julian, perhaps under orders, had insisted it was not payment for Vivian, but the posted reward for Bellamy. Warren placed it on the table. He did not open it. The envelope looked too white in the cabin, too clean, too official. A bridge made of paper between a world of polished glass and a room of soot and unpacked boxes. Orson walked to the door and sat. No. The dog's tail moved once. She's home. He's home. Orson stared at the door. Bellamy, Warren corrected himself, irritated. Bellamy is home. The shepherd gave a low sound, not quite a whine. Warren took off his jacket and hung it on the chair. You miss him after one night? Orson finally turned his head. There was no shame in the dog's face, no apology for attachment. He had recognized a small creature in need, protected it, and allowed the bond to exist without making a philosophy out of it. Warren envied that. He made coffee, though it was too late for coffee, and the cheap tin from Holloway's tasted exactly as bad as promised. He drank it standing near the stove while Orson kept watch at the door. You know what that place is, Warren said. Rooms full of people deciding what a man means before he speaks. Orson did not respond. Not our business. The dog lowered himself to the floor with a sigh that made his shoulders stiffen. Warren set the mug down harder than necessary. Fine, don't argue. Just sit there looking noble and disappointed. The cabin answered with the ticking of cooling metal. Warren looked at the envelope again. Reward. He had returned the dog, completed the task, removed himself. That was the clean version. But the day did not feel clean. It felt unfinished in the places a man could not bandage. He picked up the pine-patterned blanket and found, tangled in one corner, a few white hairs from Bellamy's coat. Something small and unwelcome moved in his chest. At dawn, a vehicle came up the cabin road. Warren heard it before Orson did, which was unusual, and probably because Orson had finally fallen asleep near the door. The engine was smoother than the local trucks, but not heavy enough for a Lodge SUV. Warren opened the door before the knock. Vivian stood on the porch holding a thermos in one hand and a rolled set of maps under her arm. Bellamy sat at her feet wearing his blue collar and silver snowflake charm. The puppy spotted Orson through the doorway and erupted into a full-body wag so intense he nearly fell off the porch. Vivian wore a dark green winter parka, plain boots, and no jewelry except the snowflake pendant at her throat. Her hair was tied back simply. There was nothing careless about her appearance, but she had not come dressed as Whitcombe Lodge. She had come dressed for weather. I hope it's not too early, she said. It is, Warren replied. She accepted that. I brought coffee. That improves your case. Bellamy squeezed past her boots and launched himself at Orson. Orson, who had risen with great dignity, lost part of it when the puppy crashed into his chest and began licking his muzzle. The old shepherd tolerated this for 3 seconds before placing one paw gently over Bellamy's back, pinning him in place like a badly folded towel. Vivian looked at them and laughed. Not the careful smile from the lodge, a real laugh, startled out of her before she could make it elegant. Warren stepped aside. Come in. The words surprised him less than they should have. Vivian entered and set the thermos on the table. Her eyes moved over the cabin, not with pity, not with curiosity sharpened into judgment, but with attention. She noticed the stove, the tools, Orson's bed, the folded fleece blanket on the chair. She saw the unopened envelope, too. Her expression did not change, which Warren appreciated. I spoke with my family, she said. Figured. The vote has been postponed. That good? It is not nothing. He nodded. That's usually where real things start. She unrolled the maps on the table. They were marked with old service routes, shelter points, hazard zones, and notes in different colors. Some were official printouts. Others looked copied from older archives. I want to propose a winter shelter program, she said. Not as a memorial plaque, not as charity theater, a real one. Managed access, restored service points, volunteer training, radio check-in, animal recovery coordination, county rescue partnership. Warren stared at the maps. Vivian placed a finger on Service Point 3. This station worked because someone once thought through what a person would need when everything else failed. I need someone who understands that kind of thinking. He looked up. Deputy Mendez. Yes, her too. She knows the county side. Dr. Keller can advise on animal care. Nolan will help with transport once he stops pretending his shoulder is optional. May Holloway already knows which locals will donate supplies and complain while doing it. Despite himself, Warren pictured May doing exactly that. Vivian continued. But I need someone who knows winter movement, shelter discipline, working dogs, and how to teach people not to become problems for the rescuers trying to help them. That a job description? It could be. No. She did not flinch, but the room tightened. Warren crossed his arms. I'm not going to be your inspirational veteran. I'm not standing in front of donors while somebody tells a warm room how the retired soldier and his brave dog gave meaning to the Whitcombe brand. Vivian looked at him steadily. Good, she said. I would hate that man. He blinked. She looked down at the maps, then back up. I am not offering you charity, Warren. I am not offering you a stage. I am offering work. Paid or unpaid can be discussed, but not as reward, as value. If you say no because the work is wrong for you, I will accept it. If you say no because you think I came here to polish my family's conscience with your life, then you are not listening to me any better than my family listened last night. The words hit clean. No drama, no pleading, only a boundary. Orson, as if the matter bored him now that humans had finally reached honesty, lowered his head beside Bellamy. Warren looked at the maps again. He saw the old ranger station, the bridge, the bend where the snow had drifted. The places where a bad decision could become a body before anyone at the lodge finished breakfast. He saw useful work. That was dangerous too. Useful work could become purpose if a man was not careful. I don't work well in committees, he said. Vivian's face softened. Neither do I. I don't dress for donor breakfasts. I suspected. I won't be managed by Julian. No one should be managed by Julian before coffee. He almost smiled. Vivian touched the map again. Help me design the first training route. That's all I am asking today. If after that you want nothing more to do with it, you can say so. Warren looked toward the door. Outside, morning had turned the snow blue and silver. The lake lay beyond the trees, calm under a pale sky. Orson rose slowly and walked out onto the porch without being told. Bellamy followed, tumbling through the doorway into fresh powder. Warren and Vivian stood side by side at the threshold. Orson moved carefully across the snow, his old shoulders stiff, but his head high. Bellamy bounded around him in clumsy circles, vanished chest deep in a drift, then popped up with snow on his nose and outrageous delight. Vivian laughed again. Warren felt the sound move through the cold air and not disturb it. There was no promise in the moment, no confession, no hand reaching for his. Only a woman who had come to his door with maps instead of pity, and a dog who had refused to pretend attachment was weakness. Warren breathed in the winter morning. All right, he said. Vivian turned to him. One route, he added. We start with Service Point 3. Her smile did not try to win. It simply received. One route, she said. Below them, Lake Tahoe held the first light of morning in a long sheet of blue silver. Orson stood beside Bellamy at the edge of the porch, one old guardian and one small survivor, both looking out as if the world had opened a little wider than it had been yesterday. Warren did not know where the work would lead. For the first time in a long while, that did not feel like a threat. By March, winter had begun to loosen its grip without fully letting go. The roofs in Incline Village dripped steadily at noon, and muddy tire tracks appeared where snow had once covered everything cleanly. Yet higher up, the peaks still held their white crowns, and the forest roads remained treacherous in the mornings when yesterday's melt froze hard beneath a new dusting of snow. Lake Tahoe changed color by the hour. At sunrise, it was blue steel. By afternoon, it could turn glassy and bright, carrying the sky as if the whole world had been washed and set carefully back into place. Warren Pike did not trust spring. Not completely. Spring is winter lying with better lighting, he told Vivian one morning while they stood outside Service Point 3, watching Julian Voss attempt to install a weatherproof information board without getting his gloves dirty. Vivian looked at the slush around their boots. That sounds like something you should embroider on a pillow. I don't embroider. I suspected. Orson lay on an old canvas mat near the doorway, his front paws crossed, his amber eyes half closed but attentive. His black and gold coat had thickened again after weeks of better rest and better food, though the gray around his muzzle remained. His left shoulder still stiffened after long walks, and Warren no longer pretended not to notice. He had learned, grudgingly, that care did not insult the dog's pride if it came without pity. Bellamy, on the other hand, had no pride to protect. The white puppy bounced through wet snow near the steps, dragging a strip of surveyor's tape like a captured enemy flag. He had grown taller, though not wiser, and his silver snowflake charm flashed whenever he turned his head. He had become known among the volunteers as Assistant Director of Disruptions, a title May Holloway insisted should be embroidered before anything Warren suggested. The old ranger station had changed slowly, not into something polished. Warren had fought that from the beginning. The logs had been repaired, not hidden. The iron stove had been cleaned and inspected. New emergency blankets filled the cabinet. A radio relay box sat on a reinforced shelf near the window. Maps of winter routes, hazard zones, and animal recovery points had been sealed behind clear panels. Outside, a new wooden sign hung beneath the faded original. Marion Winter Haven, Service Point 3. The letters had been carved by Warren in his cabin over 3 cold evenings. He had sanded them by hand, stained the wood dark, and refused 3 separate offers to have a professional sign company elevate the finish. Vivian had watched him refuse the 3rd offer and said, "You know, sometimes professional help is not an attack." Sometimes. Was that agreement? No. She had smiled and let it be. That was one of the things that had changed between them. Vivian had stopped trying to pull answers from Warren before he was ready to give them. Warren had stopped treating every kindness from her as if it came with a hidden invoice. Neither change had happened cleanly. There had been days when he ignored 2 calls and answered the 3rd only because Deputy Carla Mendez drove up to his cabin and threatened to list him as a missing person out of spite. There had been afternoons when Vivian arrived from lodge meetings, stiff-backed and distant, speaking in the measured voice of the Whitcombe air, rather than the woman who had once knelt in gas station snow holding a lost puppy to her chest. They learned to come back. Not dramatically, not with apologies shaped for an audience. Vivian would leave a folder on his porch and write, "No need to answer tonight." Warren would fix a broken latch at the lodge service shed before dawn and say nothing about it. Bellamy would run between them as if all human distance were merely poor use of available space. Orson would lie where both could see him and make withdrawal look foolish by refusing to participate in it. The program became real, in pieces. Lydia Whitcombe made it difficult in the way useful people often did. She cut Vivian's first budget proposal almost in half, then rebuilt it line by line until it could survive questions from accountants, insurers, and board members who preferred goodwill only after liability had been tamed. "Compassion with no maintenance schedule is just future negligence," Lydia said during one meeting. Warren had stared at her for a long moment, then nodded. Annoying, but correct. Lydia looked pleased in the restrained way of someone who considered open delight a security risk. Julian found his place, too. At first, he hovered at the edge of the project like a man supervising a storm. He worried over signage language, guest access, staff responsibilities, chain of command charts, radio protocols, emergency waivers, and the exact shade of reflective paint on trail markers. Warren found him exhausting. Carla found him useful, and told him so in the tone of a woman offering a medal and a warning at once. "You're a nervous clipboard," Carla said, "but you're our nervous clipboard now." Julian did not know whether to be offended, so he chose productivity. May Holloway organized donations through the market. She claimed she was not organizing anything, merely making people feel guilty in alphabetical order. Cans of food, wool blankets, spare leashes, boot warmers, batteries, and old but serviceable dog crates began appearing in labeled bins. Nolan Briggs, recovered enough to drive but not enough to lift anything without being scolded, handled transport runs in a lodge utility van he treated like a battle horse. Arthur Whitcombe remained harder to read. He attended meetings without speaking much. He questioned insurance numbers, asked whether the lodge could support staff time, and frowned whenever Vivian used the phrase community trust, though he no longer dismissed it. Once, Warren found him alone outside Service Point 3, standing before the new sign before it had been mounted. Arthur held his silver pocket watch in one hand. "This was Marion's handwriting," he said without turning. Warren looked at the carved letters. "Vivian showed me an old note. She did not ask my permission." "No." Arthur's mouth moved faintly. "Her mother rarely did, either." They stood in the cold a while, two men who had loved different parts of the same woman's legacy without knowing what to do with one another. Then Arthur reached into his coat and took out an older wooden placard, weathered and cracked. The faded words were barely visible. "Winter Service Point. All are welcome." "She kept this in the lodge archive," Arthur said. "I thought it had been thrown away." Warren accepted the placard carefully. Arthur looked at the station, then back at the wood in Warren's hands. "Put it inside," he said. "Not outside. It's too fragile for weather now." It was not an apology. Warren understood that. Some men apologized by returning what they had kept safe because they did not know how to say they were sorry it had ever been hidden away. The morning of the opening arrived with light snow. Not enough to close roads, enough to soften sound, to settle on shoulders and hats, to make the pines look newly patient. People came in layers. Lodge staff in winter uniforms, county rescue volunteers, 2 veterinarians from the local clinic, ski patrol members, a handful of old-timers who claimed they were only there to inspect whether anyone had ruined the station. And half the town because May had declared there would be coffee and then refused to say whether it was good. Carla Mendez stood near the radio table, checking equipment with a young deputy while pretending not to be proud. Nolan leaned against the lodge van, sling gone now, but shoulders still stiff, telling anyone who would listen that he had personally survived hospital food and therefore could survive anything. Julian moved between groups with a clipboard, answering questions before they formed fully. Lydia stood near the donation table, calculating something in her head while a local reporter tried and failed to make her say the project was heartwarming. "It is operationally promising," Lydia said. The reporter blinked. May, passing by with a coffee urn, said, "Right, heartwarming. She means heartwarming." Vivian wore a dark green parka and boots dusted with snow. Her snowflake pendant rested at the base of her throat. She had spoken with guests, staff, volunteers, and 3 board members already, but Warren could tell she was nervous by the way her fingers touched the pendant and then deliberately dropped away. He stood near the steps, wearing his olive combat shirt beneath a canvas work vest, field jacket open despite the cold because he had been hauling supplies since dawn. He had agreed to say a few words only after Vivian promised the words hero, inspiration, and brand story would not appear within hearing distance. Orson lay on the top step, not as decoration, as presence. Younger rescue dogs moved around the clearing with their handlers, eager, restless, full of sharp energy. Orson watched them as if reviewing recruits with low expectations but possible hope. Whenever one pulled too hard toward noise or movement, its handler glanced at Warren, who glanced at Orson, who did nothing at all. Somehow that still taught the room patience. Bellamy had been assigned no duties because everyone had learned. He performed them anyway, greeting arrivals, stealing one glove from Julian, and attempting to climb into a crate meant for emergency blankets. When he finally curled beside Orson, the old shepherd gave him a look of exhausted tolerance and then rested his muzzle across the puppy's back. Vivian saw it from across the clearing. So did Warren. That small sight steadied them both. The opening had nearly begun when a battered Subaru came too fast up the plowed track and stopped crooked near the service van. A woman in her 70s climbed out before the engine fully died. She wore a purple knit hat, one boot tied wrong, and the wild-eyed look of someone whose morning had become a cliff. "My dog," she called. "Please, I was told. This is the place now, isn't it?" Carla was moving before the woman finished. Warren followed, then Vivian. The woman's name was Elise Porter. Her terrier mix, Sam, had slipped his harness near the lower trail when a snowmobile backfired. He was old, half-deaf, brown with a white chest, wearing a red sweater Elise had knitted herself and now hated because it had not saved him. "He won't come if strangers shout," Elise said, shaking so hard May took her elbow. "He thinks every loud voice is the vet." Warren looked at Carla. Carla looked at the trail map. Julian was already radioing the lower parking volunteer. Lydia began noting time and location. Vivian knelt beside Elise, not caring about the snow on her knees, and asked calm questions about Sam's habits. Nolan pulled a crate and blanket from the van. The system moved. Not perfectly, but it moved. Warren took Orson only as far as the trailhead. The old dog lifted his head, breathed in the air, then looked toward a stand of low brush where runoff had cut a shallow path through the snow. Warren followed the line of his gaze. Not magic, not miracle. Experience. A frightened old dog would avoid open trail, avoid voices, seek cover, follow scent downhill. Bellamy strained on his little lead, eager and useless. "No," Warren said. "You are management." Bellamy sneezed. A young handler named Grace, a ski patrol volunteer with a rangy yellow search dog, waited for Warren's nod. He gave it. She moved quietly along the brush line, not calling, letting her dog work. 10 minutes later, a radio crackled. "Found, alive, cold, scared, but found." Elise made a sound that took years off and put them back all at once. When Grace returned, carrying Sam wrapped in a thermal blanket, the old terrier's red sweater was wet and ridiculous and perfect. Elise took him with both hands and folded over him, crying into his fur. No one told her not to. No one tried to make the moment clean. Warren looked at Orson. The German shepherd sat in the snow beside him, breathing a little harder from the walk, his old shoulder low. Bellamy pressed against his side as if he understood that something important had happened and wanted credit for it. This, Warren thought, not speeches, not brochures, not his name on a donor card. This A frightened person had come to a light in the snow, and the light had answered with more than warmth. The ceremony became smaller after that, which made it better. Vivian spoke briefly. She did not call the shelter her mother's dream. She called it unfinished work. Lydia gave numbers because someone had to. Carla explained radio check-in protocols. Julian unveiled the information board and only corrected May twice when she called it the sign with too many words. Arthur stood last. For a moment, Warren thought he would not speak. Then the old man stepped to the doorway of Service Point 3 and placed Marion's weathered placard inside, above the shelf where the old notebook lay. Winter Service Point. All are welcome. He rested his hand on the wood once. My wife believed welcome was not a mood, Arthur said. It was a practice. We forgot some of that. The clearing went very quiet. Arthur looked at Vivian. We will practice again. That was all. It was enough. Later, when people were drinking coffee and pretending not to take second pastries, Vivian came to stand beside Warren near the steps. You survived the ceremony, she said. Barely. You did not glare at the reporter? I glared once. She deserved it. He looked at her, surprised. Vivian's smile was small, private, and warmer than the coffee. For a while they watched Bellamy sleep against Orson. Snow gathered on the old shepherd's back until Warren brushed it off. Orson did not open his eyes. Vivian's hand found Warren's. Not suddenly, not with drama. Her fingers touched his first, asking a question without turning it into one. Warren looked down. He could have stepped away. Months ago he would have. Instead, he let his hand close around hers. Across the clearing, Arthur saw. The old man's face did not change at first. Lydia noticed him noticing and became very interested in her coffee. Julian looked away too quickly. Nolan grinned openly until May elbowed him. Arthur held Warren's gaze. Then he gave one small nod. Not permission. Recognition. Warren felt the difference. The knot in his chest did not vanish. Men did not become whole because another man nodded in the snow. But something old loosened enough for breath to pass through. Vivian did not thank him for staying. He did not thank her for asking. They had moved beyond the fragile economy of favors. Near the donation box, the white envelope still lay folded inside Warren's jacket. He had carried it for months unopened, not because he wanted the money, but because he had not known what to do with a reward for doing something that had changed him more than it had cost him. He let go of Vivian's hand long enough to take it out. She saw the envelope and understood before he moved. Warren crossed to the donation box for Marion Winterhaven and slipped it through the slot. May, standing nearby, opened her mouth. Warren pointed at her. No speech. She closed her mouth, offended by the lost opportunity. Vivian came to his side. You didn't have to do that, she said. I know. That was why it mattered. The snow continued to fall, light and steady, turning the clearing soft around the edges. People moved in and out of the shelter. A kettle hissed on the stove. Sam, the rescued terrier, slept in Elise Porter's arms. Carla's radio crackled with ordinary weather updates. Lydia argued with a volunteer about receipt tracking. Julian reattached the glove Bellamy had stolen to the correct owner. Nolan told the story of his terrible hospital sandwich to anyone trapped within range. Orson slept on the step, Bellamy curled tight against him. The old guardian and the small survivor, breathing in the same slow rhythm. Warren stood beside Vivian and looked out through the pines toward the pale sheet of Lake Tahoe. Snow had once been the thing that hid roads, swallowed sound, and left a man alone with whatever followed him home. Now, falling over the shelter, it did something else. It gave shape to the light. It showed the path people had cleared together. Warren had come to the mountains hoping to make his life small enough that nothing could break it. Instead, a lost puppy had dragged him into a wider world. A woman who met him with maps instead of pity. A lodge learning to open its doors without turning kindness into display. A town full of people willing to complain while doing the right thing. And an old dog who had known from the beginning that guarding a heart was still work worth doing. Vivian leaned her shoulder lightly against his. Not claiming, choosing. Warren looked at Orson, then at Bellamy, then at the sign above the door. Marion Winterhaven. A shelter was not a place without storms. It was a place where the storm no longer got the final word. Warren stayed. Sometimes, healing does not arrive as a grand miracle. Sometimes, it comes as a snowy road, a lost little dog, an old loyal friend, and one person brave enough to open a door that was almost left closed. Warren, Vivian, Orson, and Bellamy remind us that home is not always the place we were born into. Sometimes, it is the place we choose to build with patience, kindness, and trust. May we all learn to notice the small lives God places in our path, and may we never be too wounded to offer warmth to someone else. If this story touched your heart, share your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more stories of hope, loyalty, and quiet miracles, please subscribe and stay with us for the next journey. May peace find you wherever you are tonight.